Justin got his PhD in 2011 under supervision of Mark Delarge, then became a postdoc with David Elders in Berkeley, and since last year he's in the Université Paris Diderot. I first met him, I think, in 2010 when he gave a beautiful talk at Oberwolfach, so I'm very much looking forward to his talk today on distances in large random regular networks. Justin.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank to the organizers for letting me speak. Just want to mention that my postdoc was joint with David and Venkat, who is here. So, yeah. So the subject that I will present to you is this work that I did during my postdoc. It was the problem was suggested to me by David Aldous. So it's a special case of a much more general principle that he has been exploring those past years, which is the following. So I'm just quoting him. One way of examining a complex mathematical structure is to sample IID random points and look at some form of induced substructure relating the random points. So maybe think of a very complex structure like I don't know, a metric space which is completely unknown to you. And if you want to explore it, a very natural way to do it is to just throw random points in this space, maybe two random points, and ask for the distance between them. Right? This will give you a lot of information. If you can understand this distribution, it will give you a lot of information about the metric space. But of course, it will not give you all the information. You cannot recover the full metric space by knowing this distribution. Right? But if you do the same for, you add a third point, again, as for the shortest path between those points, the joint distribution of lengths of those paths, then you are starting to recovering the real metric structure of your metric space. And in fact, there is a very abstract theorem in the theory of measure metric space, which tells you that the information that you get by repeating this infinitely many times, so if you have an infinite sequence of points that you throw on your space, the information that you get is exactly is the full information. You completely determine your metric space like that. So it's an interesting result, and David Aldous, the starting point of this work was the suggestion that David Aldous made, which is this gives automatically a very natural notion of convergence for metric spaces, which is exactly the convergence of those marginal distributions. Right? So you have imagine you have a sequence of metric spaces like graphs, for example, and suppose you know that the point-to-point distance converge to some limiting random variables, but also the joint distribution of those three pairwise distances also converge, and so on. For every fixed k, you get this marginal distribution convergence. Then it's in some sense you have a convergence of the whole metric space, right? In some weak sense, but interesting sense. And so he wanted me to find a situation where one could make this machinery work, and that's basically what I will present to you. So my complex mathematical structure will be just a very simple structure, actually, just a graph, right? A random graph on top of which I put some random lengths on the edges. So it's exactly the first passage percolation context. So you had a beautiful view of first passage percolation in Remco's talk, so I won't be long in that introduction. So again, it's just you take your favorite graph and add random lengths on top of the edges. This defines a metric on the vertex set, and you may want to study this metric. So in other words, you may want to study the matrix which records all those distances. Right? That's the metric space. And so first passage percolation was introduced. So at the beginning, the interest was more in a fixed infinite graph and what you could say about the shape of a large ball and those kind of things. But more recently, there was this growing interest into large but finite graphs, random, on which you study interesting parameters like point-to-point distance, diameter, structure of path, and so on. So depending on which model of graph you take, which distribution of lengths you consider, and which kind of parameter you are interested in, there are many possible works, and here is a sub-list of those works. You have heard a lot about that in the previous talk. So here I will focus on a very specific aspect of those works. Really, it's not intended to be general. So let me point out this paper. So it's a paper which considers the configuration model and a special case where the edge lengths are exponential. So let's keep things simple. Let me recall what the configuration model is. Well, it's still on the board. You just pre-decide the degree of every vertex as you wish, and then you pair everything up at random to create a multigraph. Right? That's basically this. And the result that I wanted to mention, so again, as you have seen, it's a very general result, the result by Remco. But to keep things simple, let me focus on the special case where the degree is fixed. So think of R equal to 3, for example. So I get a 3 regular random graph, multigraph actually. I put a random length on the edges, and the point is that the point-to-point distance between two typical points in this graph, as you have seen in the previous talk, it behaves logarithmically in the size, and if you recenter, there is actually a convergence of this minimal length to a random variable, which is moreover explicit, a bit more explicit than what Remco told you about in the previous talk. In fact, so they managed to show that it has this nice decomposition into, can be written as a sum of 3 random variables which are completely explicit. At least they have densities that are completely explicit. So I wrote the density, not that it matters so much, but I just wanted to insist on the fact that it's really a simple random variable, right? Up to some constant, it's the logarithm of a gamma random variable and the logarithm of an exponential. So really a simple limiting structure. And so that was the starting point. And the question that I'm now asking is the following one: what about correlation? There is nothing special about point 1 and 2. So if this weak convergence of the distance between point 1 and point 2, it should also be true for the point 2 and point 3, right? But what about the correlation? At least on the picture, it seems intuitive that these should be correlated, right? At least locally around point 2, there should be some structure here, and I wanted to capture this structure. This is for 3 points, but you can do it for k points. And arbitrary k, is there a limiting distribution for this? Okay. So again, let me recall the starting point. This is a single marginal convergence, if you want. If you look at the matrix of distances in my graph, the result of Remco is the convergence of a single entry in that array. And the natural hope, of course, is that the whole array converges, right, weakly to some infinite random array. And hopefully the limiting random array is interesting in some sense. We'll have some interesting structure. So again, what I mean by convergence in distribution for arrays is just a weak convergence. Take every finite block inside this array, it should converge to the corresponding finite block in your limiting random array. So just a basic finite dimensional convergence. Right, and if you can do this, then in a sense, you will have captured the relative geometry of your network, not only point-to-point distances, but how they are related to each other, the metric geometry. Right, so that's the goal here. Then, if you start thinking a bit about this W, what it could be, there are a few obvious constraints on this W. The first thing is that if it exists, this limit must be exchangeable, right? Must have the correct marginals first. That's for sure. That's one thing. The single entry should be exactly the one given by Remco, right? So that's one thing. But there are many choices which respect this. The second thing is that it should be exchangeable. So in the following sense, that if you permute the rows and columns simultaneously, you should see the same distribution in total, because in this graph there is no role played by the labels of the vertices. Right? And so you probably know this famous work of Definity for exchangeable sequences. Right? You can define the same notion of exchangeability for sequences, and there is this nice representation which tells you that basically an exchangeable sequence is a mixture of IID random variables. There is a generalization to exchangeable arrays. There is a representation like that. Basically, an exchangeable array is a mixture of independent entries. Not only independent entries, you are allowed also for something which depends on the column or the row, but that's it. Every exchangeable array has this form. Right? So you know the marginals and you know this form, but still there are many possible choices. For example, one very simple but certainly not the true one would be to take this marginal and make IID copies of that everywhere. This is exchangeable, but it would not be very. It would be surprising that this is the use. Okay, so here is the result now. So for the pairing model, again, fixed degree, but arbitrary fixed degree. And you let n go to infinity. You have convergence of the metric, the distance matrix to a limiting random array. And moreover, the limiting random array is explicit. That is very simple form. It's just a sum of contributions, and every contribution is independent. So this has a very nice interpretation, right? If you think about it, it just means that the cost to go from a vertex I to a vertex j in your limiting graph, it's a relative cost because you have recentered everything. But it's just you have to pay a cost to exit the local environment around node I. Then you reach the highway. On the highway, everything is independent, so you have this Yij cost to switch to the highway exit of vertex j, and then once you are here, you need to enter the local neighborhood of vertex j, and you pay the local cost. Right? So very simple structure, and that's of course it's an example of an exchangeable array, but. Yeah. And so, as Remco said, the pairing model, so this configuration model was introduced by Bolobash in the 80s, and the point of it was really to have a simple model to understand the uniform on the graph. And then there is a way, sort of automatic way to transfer results from the configuration model to actual simple graphs. Right? So the same holds for this uniform regular graph model. So here it's really a simple graph taken uniformly at random among all possible regular graphs on n nodes. Right? So the usual argument that is used, I will tell you a bit about it in the end. It does not work exactly here, so this requires a small argument that I will tell you about.
The usual argument is for convergence in probability, and this is convergence in distribution.
Exactly. That's the difficulty, exactly. So before I move on to some ingredients of the proof, let me just explain the first picture that you have seen at the beginning. Now you understand why I plotted this. Really, that's this local structure and highway structure in the graph. That's how a typical large regular network should look like in the asymptotic. The other thing that I want to mention is that for technical reason, everything is restricted to this fixed degree sequence. So I'm not every vertex here has the same degree, right? But I think Remco is also convinced that it should hold for any degree distribution that has a finite variance or mean should. It's just a matter of technicalities, but the ingredient of the proof should be the same. So okay, so let me say a word a bit about the proof during this the second part of the talk. Again, what we use is this very nice property of the pairing model, which is the fact that you can pair edges sequentially instead of just doing a uniform matching at random. You can do it sequentially, and you have a lot of freedom to do that. So, I will come back to this later. The strategy is exactly the one that Remco told you about. You have you want to explore your graph from k sources, right? And you will do it by growing balls locally around those sources, and wait until they intersect, because when they intersect, you know that you have created a path between them, and you want to study so it's a continuous time Markov process, thanks to the fact that the edge lengths are exponential. You can explore your graph like that, and of course the Markov process, everything depends on the total size of your graph, and you want to study this as the size of the graph tends to infinity. Right? So really, I want the joint analysis of the collision times of my balls as n goes to infinity. And what I use to do this is the coupling to the configuration model. So instead of drawing my graph immediately, I do it sequentially. I use this nice property that, again, I can choose an edge arbitrarily in this graph, an half edge, and decide to which it should be paired. Right? So as long as I choose the second half edge uniformly at random, I get what I want. Then after that, I can play the same game again. Pick any half edge as I wish. The choice can even depend on the history of the process. So I can really pick it as I want arbitrarily, and then match it uniformly at random. And the point is that the distribution, when you do this, does not depend on the choice that you have used at every step. Right? So that's really why the pairing model has proved so successful. Right? And so what I do is use this. I couple this with the length on the edges. So here is my graph. Think of the case where k equals 3. So I have 3 sources, and I want to know the distance, the graph distance between those various points. And what I do is I equip every half edge with an exponential timer, and I wait for the first time to ring. Suppose it's this one. Then I pair it uniformly at random with some other half edge in my graph. Here's this. And I continue doing this. So of course, at the beginning, there are only 3 vertices on the top, and there are n minus 3 above. So it's much more likely than that you pick a new vertex. But after some time, you will start to see collisions, right? For example, here you have discovered a path between the yellow cluster and the red cluster, and the precise time where this edge is formed is exactly half the distance between this node and that node, right? It's a simple property of the model, and that's what Remco uses to study the distance, the point-to-point distance. The problem is that this is no longer true if you think about it. I mean, you can continue this process and wait for also the green cluster to be connected like that, right? But then in the same time, you have also created a path between the red and the green. So do you need to wait for an edge between the green and the red directly, or should you consider this path going through the yellow cluster? What I mean is that the time at which the balls intersect does not really give you the distance except for the first one. Then you are not sure to get the distance after that. What you get really is the length of a minimal path with the additional constraint that the path should always, so for green and red, for example, the path should always stay closer to the green root or the red root than to any other root. That's what you recover when you wait for the collision time between those balls, right? So it's not really what you wanted, but let's pretend that this is really what you wanted. So that's the quantity I'm interested in, the time at which those balls intersect. So again, if I have only 2 sources, then this is exactly what I want. But if I have more, then it's just an inequality, right? I just discovered one path that goes between the two. So here is the theorem. Actually, you can still study those collision times, even though they are not that interesting at first sight. And actually, they converge to what you would want, right? Exactly the limiting random array that you would like to prove to be the limit of your distance matrix. And it took me a bit of time, but the funny thing is that in fact, once you have this, you have everything. You indeed have the result that you wanted at the beginning. It's written here on the slide, and here is the simple argument. What it says, because of the second line, the inequality above, is that you just get an upper bound, right? You get a limiting upper bound for the array that you want to study, but it's just an upper bound. However, if you take the case k equals 2, you get equality of the marginals. So in fact, it is really the limit that you wanted. And so that really proves the theorem that I'm aiming to. And so now I can concentrate on giving more details for the proof of this part. Right? How do I study the joint distribution of collisions between the balls?
This is a very clever trick to go to the model.
It was a bit of a miracle at first sight, because so I need to insist on something, which is that although it's not indicated here, this quantity tau ij implicitly depends on k. It implicitly depends on the other balls, right? Because you are counting path only, they are constrained by the other balls. Whereas the real distance between I and j does not depend on the number of balls that you have picked, right? So a priori, this random array is not consistent as k varies. Right? It's not, but the limit is, and that's what makes everything work. Right? And so what it says really is just that to go from a point to another point, the shortest path will not go through any point that you have selected independently of that. That's really what makes everything work. Okay, so for I have just two slide proof of the convergence of the collision times, and it's a really simple argument. So remember, we have those clusters that are growing progressively, and I just want to understand when they meet. Right? So at the beginning, as I said, it's much more likely that you will pick edges that are from the top of your graph, unpaired edges that are from the top. So there will be no collision. Right? So if I look at the number of alpha edge in every cluster, I can approximate it by something which does not collide at all. And this is just, if you think about it, it's just I have a k-independent branching process, right? At least at the beginning. It's an approximation, but it's a good approximation. And then independent branching process, we know everything about this object. I mean, almost everything that we want to know here. In particular, you know the growth size. It's just there is a martingale out there which tells you that the size grows exponentially, and there is a limiting random variable showing up, which can be proven to be a gamma random variable, and that's it. So you have an approximation for your clusters, at least for a time that is sufficiently large, but not too large, because if it's too large, then the approximation is not true anymore, the original approximation. So let's use this approximation now to understand the collision times. Here we have neglected collisions, right? But in fact, collisions are precisely what I want to understand. Right? So I need to go back to collisions now. So let's look at what happened between the time t and t plus dt. Right? I know that my cluster has a certain size, so I know exactly how many particles should die in that cluster between those two times. Right? It should be, it's a Markov process, it should be approximately this number of deaths, right? Proportional to the size. And whenever a death occurs, so it just means that alpha edge the exponential clock has expired, I will pair it with some other alpha edge chosen uniformly at random. What's the chance that I meet cluster J? Well, it's just proportional to the size of J and divided by the total number of unpaired edges. Right? But this I approximate by the total size, because I assume that the time is not too long, and so that I have not discovered too much of my graph. Right? And so when you see those two quantities, you see that if you want to observe collisions, you have to rescale time, and the proper rescaling should be such that the two exponential, when you multiply them, should be of order n, right? to observe really collisions. So let's rescale time by this function, and let's play again the same game. So I replace every t by s here, and what I get is this. So I have a certain number of deaths at in each cluster in this rescale time horizon, and I have this for each death. I have a certain chance to result in a collision with cluster J. And now you see that it's very unlikely that there is a collision, but in the same time I'm doing a lot of those collisions. I'm doing a lot of trials, so there is a Poisson process showing up here, and indeed it's just a Poisson approximation. You have convergence of these collisions to a Poisson point process, and the intensity is just the product of those two quantities, right? So now I know exactly how the collisions behave, but recall that it's in the rescale version, so I just need to invert this scaling, take the logarithm, and get the real process for my limiting process for my collisions. Right? In particular, I'm not interested in all collisions, but just the first one. So it's just exponential random variables with this intensity. And when you take the log, what you get is really this convergence, where those variables are just exponential rate 1 random variables. Right? And that's exactly my decomposition. I have the local term, the local cost xi, local cost xj, and my yij, the highway cost here. And so it's really the local environment is due to the branching, the growth of my ball, and then this is just the highway connection. So everything is here. So now to end with, I would like to speak about this small problem of conditioning on the absence of loops and multiple edges in the configuration model, in the pairing model, because it's an argument that hopefully could be used elsewhere. So let me tell you a bit about the usual argument, how it goes. It's this simple fact. Again, when you draw a graph from the pairing model, you don't really get a graph, you get a multi-graph. So there could be loops and multiple edges in this graph. But the fact is that there is still a non-zero probability that the graph is simple, right? A probability that is bounded away from 0 as n goes to infinity. You can even evaluate it, but I don't care about the limiting constant. The important fact is that it's a positive probability. And conditionally on the fact that the graph is simple, it is really a uniform regular graph. So it's really the object that you want to study at the first place. So these two things together really gives you a very strong transfer principle, meaning that everything that you manage to prove for the pairing model, which is much simpler, if you can prove that an event occurs with high probability under this pairing model, then it will automatically hold for the uniform random graph model. And that's why the pairing model was so much used. The problem is that in my result I have no, and in many results like that, there is no with high probability convergence. It's a distributional convergence, and in general for distributional convergence, you cannot just condition and get the same thing. So you need something new. Turns out that there is a simple answer here in our case, and I hope the argument is reproducible also. So this will be my last slide, technical slide, I guess. So here is what we want to do. What does it mean really that we have a convergence in distribution of the array? We can go back to the definition of involving continuous bounded functions, right? So I want to compare two arrays, my k by k block in my real finite n matrix, and the limiting array that I want to prove convergence to. Right? And I want, of course, to compare expectation under f of this of those two functionals, right? So this is really what I want. The term on the left is what happened in the uniform regular graph, and I would like it to be the same limit as before. So that's what I want to prove, and in fact there is a two-line proof of this thing. The idea is to introduce, instead of turning just my k by k block in my huge matrix, I replicate it a finite number of times, but a large finite number of times. Okay, so I take several copies of that block. I look, instead of looking at the 10 first vertices, I look at the 10 first vertices plus the 10 next plus the 10 next, and I look at those diagonal blocks. Of course, they are not independent in my original graph, but they are exchangeable completely. They have the same distribution, all those blocks. And I use this exchangeability to write the expectation I'm interested in into just a normalized sum, because everything has the same distribution, right? Expectation is linear, so that's it. Right? And then I take absolute values, and absolute values on the left, absolute values on the right, and I let n go to infinity. And what I get is this thing, right? I know that because m is fixed, I can apply my finite dimensional convergence, and I know that it will converge to the m copies of my limiting array, right? But in the limiting array, everything is independent. So those variables were not independent, but those one are. They are really IID copies. And this is true for every m, and because they are IID, I can now send m to infinity and use a strong law of large number to get that, in fact, the lim sup is 0. Right? So that's a simple trick to exploit the result that I had on the pairing model and transfer it to the regular model. Okay, so I will stop here. Just mention a few extensions because really it was done in the simplest possible setting. What about more general degree sequences, not only regular but playing around with that a bit like Remco told you about. So the point-to-point result of Remco is valid for arbitrary degree sequences, right? So why not trying to push the joint distribution result to those degrees? And apparently there should not be any. We should not expect big surprises in this context. Another interesting question would be to generalize to other edge length distribution. Again, the point-to-point distance, the result works also under more general assumptions, so why not doing the same here? And maybe a bit more about the structure of the path, right? Because now you know the joint distribution of distances, but it does not really tell you, for example, if I want to connect to two different people, what is the overlap? What is the structure of the overlap? Or more generally, if I look at the shortest weight tree from me to I don't know 100 people in the network, what is the structure of that tree? That's an interesting question, and well, it is a possible extension. Okay, so I'll stop here.
Time for questions.
In classical first passage percolation, people study this coloring, where you go through, assume you have three neighbors in your case, and you can look at the collection of nodes that are connected to you through a shortest path through these three neighbors. So you would color your graph into three colors. Does your technique say something on the distribution of these three objects, of these three cardinalities, or things like that?
Yeah, I think it would give, but so it's not at all the same setting. You said it was for a fixed graph and for a lattice or something. This is really for locality-like. But yeah, I think it should be possible to say something about yes. I have to think about it.
So from your proof, it seemed that the Poisson nature, the sort of the exponential nature of the y, this log of an exponential, right?
Yes.
Has nothing to do with the Erlang character of the z, so to speak, right? So the Poisson nature of the y is something more universal somehow than the Erlang nature of the z. So your conjecture for extensions would probably be that you'd have log exponential in between and then some dependent things hanging off the edge. Is that correct?
Depending on which kind of generalization you think about, edge length.
For instance, for Remco's problem, a different degree distance.
Yeah. It would be the only thing that would change is really those local terms. But it should be exactly those local zi. They appear because of they are limit of some martingale, and there is for another branching process when you have a different degree distribution. You have another branching process, but there is still a limiting zi, and that would be the log of this would be the.
But are there cases where the thing in between will not be log exponential?
Maybe by playing with the distribution of edge lengths. Maybe Remco probably knows about it because this thing you already see it. For pairwise.
No, I mean the feeling I got from the proof structure was that there's this thing in the middle, right? It's log exponential. That seems to be more universal somehow.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So you expect that to happen always.
we know that happens.
Okay.
I mean, in my first theorem, this limiting random variable again has the same structure where it's the log of a martingale limit plus the log of another martingale limit minus a Gumbel. So the Gumbel is universal.
But even when playing with different length distribution, right?
Yes. The martingale limit depends both on the graph structure and on the edge weight distribution, but the Gumbel always persists.
Okay, if there are no more questions or comments, then let's close the session and thank you, Stan, once more.